Poor managerial appointments, wasteful recruitment policy, no youth development, financial fair play issues, a disenfranchised fan base. This is Everton right now, and the fans aren't happy. Welcome to the Final Whistle podcast. My name is Harry, and I'm joined by Bobby tonight for this episode. And we're going to be talking, obviously, about Everton, as I just mentioned there. Now, interesting situation with them. The fans aren't happy with how the club is doing at the moment in the league with recent results. Bob, do you think that they're right to be disappointed?
I mean, obviously they're right to be disappointed. They hadn't lost. They hadn't won a game in like 7 in the Prem. Obviously, I don't know. I can't remember who they stopped that streak to.
I
don't think we need to talk about that. But moving on. I think they obviously have right to be disappointed because they started the season quite well, as they do often. Actually, start the season really well and then tail off a little bit. So yeah, it was interesting, but yeah, they've got a win now, so we'll see how that starts going for them. If it kicks on, I'm not too sure.
Well, they're 12th now in the league. Obviously, they beat a certain London club. On Monday. They've how many points? They've got 18 points. They're not too far off Arsenal in 7th, but obviously they're 8 points off the bottom 3. Do you think this is kind of where Everton should be in the league? I think a lot of their fans expect them to be like around 7th or whatever, but I swear that expectation's always there, but they're never there anyway. So
yeah, I mean, I don't know. They have I don't know, maybe just with the size of the club, they have a bigger expectation because we know Everton have always been a fairly decent team. Obviously, they've had a few good players over the years. It's been like 27 odd years that they won a trophy, which obviously brings on to the next point that obviously the fans were going to take that walkout in the 27th minute, sort of like a stand up and show their disapproval towards the owners and stuff. But yeah, I mean, they always have high expectations because they set high standards at the start of the season. I think maybe, I don't know, it's a strange one actually. It's almost like their expectations come out of nowhere because they haven't been doing themselves justice, like showing they deserve to be in that talk. So it's interesting. Yeah, I wonder where it does come from.
It's strange as fans coming across and going, "Oh, this isn't good enough." Being where we are in the league, results and things like that. But you look over the period of time over the seasons previously, as you said, they've never been anywhere near the top section. So they, as you said, the fans walked out in the last 2 games, 5 minutes, 27 minutes in as well. I think in the next game, I think that was the Arsenal game, in protest against the board and against the owner, Farhad Mashiri. I think I said that right. Do you think that the owner and the board see those protests, and do you think that would concern them, or do you not think they'll care?
Well, it sort of depends because I'll be honest, I'm not too familiar on Everton's owners. I don't know how long they've had ownership of the club and how much of their money they've had invested in. Do you know?
I think it's been like 5 years. I think from what I've heard that they've been there. And then I know they've spent at least 300 million on transfers in the last couple of years. So,
I mean, we know that they spend a lot of money. They spent big money on players like, they brought in Rodriguez, Allen, Decore, Sigurdsson. But yeah, we know they've spent money. Whether or not that's money from the club, because obviously Man United spend a lot of money, but we know that the Glazers are obviously owners that don't really care, so they spend a lot of the club's revenue rather than their own investments into the business. So I'm not too sure my standpoint at Everton's owners. I know that obviously it seems like the fans aren't happy. Whether that's just down to the footballing or how the club's run, I'm not too sure, to be honest.
Yeah, one of the criticisms from the higher up figure for the higher up figures, not from them, is that the club doesn't have a good youth development policy. Obviously, we've seen them come up with players like Wayne Rooney in the past through the academies. But then you look at all the current rivals. Liverpool have got people like Trent, Chelsea obviously got Mount, United have got Greenwood, Arsenal, Smith Rowe, and Saka. They've got a few bursting through, but none to the level of like the others.
Like Gordon.
Yeah. Like, do you think this is something that they need to improve on if they want to compete for European spots? Because having club players come through the club, obviously not costing anything to bring them in, and going into the first team is quite helpful.
Yeah, it is. I mean, brings down to our point again of our expectations of Everton and how highly we think they're going to perform. It also brings down to the fact that do we expect them to their academy to be producing youngsters of the quality of the big six teams, because obviously they
Yeah.
have probably a better infrastructure and better coaching. So it's another factor of what are the expectations for Everton. Obviously, they definitely could, because any club can have good youngsters. It just sort of depends, I wouldn't say luck, but maybe sometimes you can just get lucky and you have a great player, a gem, if you'd like, in your academy. So yeah, I'm sure their fans would like to. It might bring a bit of positivity into the club having a new exciting youth. Obviously, we know that Arsenal rely heavily on our youth, especially, which motivates our fan base quite a lot. So I think it definitely would be a positive for Everton, but I'm not too sure how realistic it is.
Yeah. I mean, look at the moment, obviously Rafa in charge got appointed at the start of the season, didn't spend a lot. I think it was 2 million in the end for Gray, Damari Gray, sorry, and Andros Townsend. For 2 million in total. Probably the best two performing players actually at the moment.
Yeah.
How do you think Rafa's doing? Obviously, some fans are upset, but how do you think he's doing?
I mean, it's interesting because obviously when he first came, there was this massive outrage because it's Rafa Benitez and he's obviously a Liverpool manager. So not many of the Everton fans were happy about that. I'm sure just because of like point blank rivalry and
Mm,
loyalty to their club. But I think we've seen that he's identified clearly what their weakness was. We know that they have a fairly solid defense. Obviously, they've got Yerry Mina and Keane, who on their day are good players. Obviously, Dino is one of the more promising left backs in the league. Obviously, got a decent amount of assists last season. Their right back spot, I'm not too sure on that, but yeah, we know that obviously in the two holding midfielders as well, Doucouré, who's a bit more attacking, but he's sort of a holding, and Alan, who obviously both quality players.
yeah.
And then it obviously has shown us that they were relying too much on Dominic Calvert-Lewin and sometimes Richarlison last season and then seasons before to pick them out of holes. So I think it's very clever of him to notice the need to bring in attacking options. Obviously, the two he has brought in have I would say kicked on. I think Damari Gray's been a great signing. Townsend has been decent. Definitely higher performance than a lot of people expected, because I remember a lot of people taking the mick, obviously, when they just signed those two players. It just didn't seem like it was that much, especially considering how much people often spend in the transfer market. So yeah, I would say he's definitely identified the problems that were in the team, but it seems like hasn't really filled it. Because obviously they went on that 7 game loss streak, if you will, without a win.
Yeah.
So it's hard to know.
I think it's again, as we've been talking about, coming down to the fan expectations of Everton. Um, Rafa's a good manager, everyone knows that, and that he's got the experience in the league. I think a lot of things have been going on behind the scenes that he hasn't got a lot of power. I think obviously the director of football's just been relieved of his duties, which will give Rafa more freedom. Transfer wise. I think odd signings like Rondon, which obviously worked well for him at Newcastle, was probably
Mhm.
just one of those ones that wasn't needed at the club.
Yeah,
Bit of backup, but it hasn't worked. Rafa, I think, as you said, obviously there was the kind of the anger towards his appointment, so it's always going to be hard for him. I think his job is still on the line. Obviously, I think the Arsenal win was quite an important one
yeah,
in terms of him keeping his job so far, potentially changing the fortunes this season. But before Rafa, manager was obviously Carlo Ancelotti. Um, he's now at Real Madrid, left the club for Real Madrid probably in a heartbeat. Where do you think it went wrong with him? Do you think there was excitement when he came in and was doing well, like they were in the top four, I think, at the start of last season.
hmm
He left. Do you think it was a mistake bringing that caliber of manager in? Because there's always going to be a club above Everton, really, at the moment. Do you think that was
yeah.
a good appointment for them?
I think at the time it was a good appointment. Obviously, it showed a lot of ambition from the club, and sorry, he brought in players of high quality. Obviously, when they signed James Rodriguez, even though he hadn't performed to quite a high level as he'd set previous years, he was a good signing. He started off really well. Obviously, had Dominic Calvert-Lewin was top scorer in the league. Dini obviously said playing really well, and it looked like the start of last season, Everton were a different team. They were flying, and
Mm.
obviously, reality started to kick in, and Everton went back to sort of their average I don't say average, but average to a slightly above average ways, many slip ups during the season. So yeah, I do think it is a signing of ambition, much like Tottenham at Mourinho at Tottenham. Obviously, both of those didn't work out. So yeah, I don't think you can go back and say it was a bad signing because I think he brought a lot of players in and maybe instilled some knowledge, especially into Calvert Lewin, to make him more of a senior player. So yeah, I think it's definitely a good signing, but unfortunately, it didn't work out in terms of bringing them top four Europe or trophies. So depends
Yeah.
how you look on it.
I think also one of the things when Ancelotti was appointed was the fact that you're going to be bringing in bigger players. I think Alan was a great signing. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, he was a great player at Napoli and has done all right at Everton. James Rodriguez is probably the name that everyone will relate with Ancelotti being there. And
Mm-hmm.
he was doing brilliant before his injury, and then Ancelotti left and he had no reason to be there. So he's gone.
Yeah.
So it was a bit of an interesting signing there. But when you look at it, Rafa, Ancelotti, then they also had Sam Allardyce, Marco Silva, Ronald Koeman before, all arguably good managers who have so far failed at Everton. Big Sam didn't do that badly, really.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to ask yourself, is this the manager's problem? Do you think it's a deeper rooted thing? Obviously, we've said the owners don't know too much about them, but the fans aren't happy. They haven't been doing great the behind the
Yeah.
scenes work.
I
And
mean, the fact that they've been through so many managers would lead you to think that it is a deeper rooted problem. Obviously, similar situations at a lot of clubs with the bad owners and going through so many managers and not finding the right fit. So yeah, it probably is something to do with that.
yeah, it's strange. I think you've also I'm surprised to see like players. Obviously, he performs well, but Seamus Coleman, you would have thought that someone would have brought in a better right back. You would have thought a younger, hungrier
Mhm.
right back because he's getting on now. Even just the squad, they just seem to be like a well, yeah, we want to be here, but we're not there. And
Mhm.
I will get onto it into a minute. The director of football spending 300 million on players. There doesn't seem to be much knowledge put into the decisions that they do at Everton. It seems to be oh, they were good, they're considered good. Let's just buy them. That approach doesn't work, does it?
No, it doesn't. You have to look at players that are going to fit in your. Well, first of all, you need to establish players to build the team around and a system that you want to play, and then obviously you have to make comfortable signings before you can make big name signings. Obviously, we've seen. Obviously, I'm always going to relate it back to Arsenal of us this summer. You know, spending sensibly, obviously bringing in not big names. Obviously, Ramsdale and Tomiyasu would be two notable ones that have performed much better than I'm sure everyone of it would have expected. So I think yeah, Everton need to get they need to they need a full reset. They need new owners. They need to get the players that they want to build their team around. Be that I would say more Calvert Lewin possibly, unless he gets picked up by a bigger team, possibly Richarlison, and then use that spine of senior players to start building a younger squad around it because we know that younger teams are much more I don't know, profitable maybe because you lose less resale value on players when they're
Yeah.
younger. Because when you go out and spend big money on older players, even if they do have a couple good seasons, when they do eventually hit their past their peak and they move on, you can't really sell them for much anyway. So it
Yeah.
seems young players are the way to go at the minute. So maybe that's what they need to try and do if they can't get their academy
Yeah.
in check.
Well, I mentioned him there. They got rid of the director of football, Marcel Brands, this week, giving Rafa more control. Brands at his time at the club, I think he joined when Marco Silva, so that was 2018. So
Yeah,
4 years, has spent 300 million pounds on players. Has brought in some good players. He brought in Richarlison, Luca Digne, obviously have come out with good signings for the club, but also other signings include Andre Gomez. It was Lersel, the keeper last year, Bernard, Jean-Philippe Gbamin, Delph.
yeah,
One that didn't work that everyone thought really would was Moise Keane, who's
yeah.
gone back now.
Shame.
Um,
He's a good talent.
yeah, this is obviously another. Do you think this is an example of a bad appointment, or do you think it's more the fact that, as we just said there, that the strategy of buying players wasn't right? Like I've seen it at Forest where we had a clueless person doing this director of football role, bringing in players, and when you're going off name base, it doesn't really work.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, when you buy for names, you may get players that can perform individually in certain games, but obviously it doesn't work as a team. It doesn't cohere or gel together. So that's possibly why signings like Moise Kean have failed, because they weren't in they're good players with the good talent and maybe even a good attitude. They just weren't in the right environment to thrive and allow them to do their best for the club.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one with the director of football approach. It's very common nowadays to have
Hmm.
someone there doing that job and let the managers just get on with the management and the coaching. Um, some managers fit it better. Obviously, I think Arsenal would. Is Arteta still just the head coach, or is he the manager now?
Oh no, he's been the manager for about a year now.
Okay, so it's a distinction because I think I don't know whether you agree. You have to, if you're going to have a director of football, you need to do the job of having someone who is just a head coach. Because we at Forest obviously had Lamucci, who was head coach, then Chris Hughton, who was the manager, and now Steve Cooper's back to the head coach. I think if you're going to do the director of football, you really have to stick to the head coach thing, don't you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, what does the director of football actually do? Are they in charge of signings and stuff? Because I know
Well,
we have Edu as our director of football.
I think so. I think the idea of the director of football is that they obviously set the vision of how the club should be performed, like playing and how they should be signing the players, type of players they should like setting a philosophy, I think is generally what they're there for, and to
Hmm.
control the behind the scenes things. So let the head coach literally just do the coaching, then they'll bring in like the transfers and everything to match it up, and Jim will have the knowledge. But it's a strange one. Obviously, he's gone. So I don't think Rafa is a director of football style manager.
No.
So it'll be interesting to see in the coming weeks how Rafa does without maybe this external pressure. Um, One thing that was brought up was that obviously spending 300 million, the club are supposedly concerned about financial fair play, which I mean, fair enough. But look at your size, the size of the club. They'll get most of that in from TV money. Probably won't be an issue. They don't have too much quality to go down. No other teams at their level are worried about financial fair play. Do you think this is something that if the owners aren't as football intelligent around football, do you think they need to bring in someone potentially at the top if they are going to stay at the club who knows how to run the club properly?
Yeah, you could maybe argue for that. Something a bit like Man United are doing, bringing in Ralph Rangnick as a 2-year advisory role. I think
Mm.
I'm not. I couldn't recommend you anyone for them to bring in because I
Yeah,
don't know about advisory directors that go around in football clubs. But I mean, I guess it would make sense if they need help with it. I mean, then again, that begs the question that if they need help, do they should they really be at the club in the first place? And do Everton really want that sort of situation where they have owners that need to get somebody else in because they can't run the club and they don't know how to do it?
yeah. I think it's a case of some owners know what they're doing football wise and have the mindset, whereas some are really should just stick to the financial backing side of things.
Hmm.
And they'll appoint someone like a CEO that's not themselves to do it. At Forest, we had Fawaz was our previous owner, and he was clueless, but he was the chairman himself, so he had
Yeah.
all the decisions on him. So
Hmm.
maybe bringing in someone that's a bit more knowledgeable. We've got Dane Murphy that came in as CEO from Barnsley, who's very good at his job. So I think it's someone like that maybe that can come in and obviously don't take him from us, but
Hmm.
someone like that to come in and settle it. But on a bit of good news for Everton fans, Richarlison came back this week and scored as Everton beat a certain club from London. Um, how big of an impact is it for Everton to have him back up top and hopefully to see Calvert-Lewin back soon?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen on Monday how important he is to them. Obviously, we know he has attitude problems. I think a lot. It's what a lot of the commentators were mentioning when we played the game on Monday. So yeah, I do think it's a great benefit. Obviously, he scored a hat trick. Obviously, he's got 3 goals, 2 of them of which are marginally offside,
Mm.
which is unlucky for himself because he definitely did deserve those goals. Just a couple of millimeters in
Those
VR, just
kneecaps over the top, or
yeah, it's just done him over. But yeah, I mean, obviously we've seen that he made chances, he made space, and he's taken those chances well. So He just has to keep thriving on that good form, especially in the moment he needs to make his case, considering Calvert-Lewin isn't there. And then when Calvert-Lewin does come back, if Richarlison is still firing, they need to figure out a way to get them both in the team at the same time and working well to bring Everton back up towards the top of the table.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you everybody for listening. That's all we've got time for today. If you are watching this on YouTube, then make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you are listening to the podcast on Spotify or Apple, make sure to follow us on that platform so you'll never miss another episode. Thank you for listening. That was The Final Whistle.